proverb for the week from Somalia.
Okay.
The oldest man in the family and a midwife do not tell everything they know.
The oldest man in the family and a midwife do not tell everything they know.
Yes.
Prof, what do you think the Somalis are saying?
I think what they're saying is they want to leave room for self-discovery.
They will not tell you everything.
Yes.
Go find out some things for yourself.
Yes.
Hey, City.
You know, this is the beauty of asking people. The way proverbs resonate with the people, it's so fascinating to hear. Because I could never have thought of it that way. Could never. And yet when you say it, it sounds very clear. So yes.
Yeah.
So it's big.
Thank you.
You need to discover a number of things for yourself.
Yes.
Through experience and of course going through the terrains of life so that you get to know.
Yeah.
You need not to be told everything.
Yeah.
And even in our education system, you have the formal education, you have that which you are born with. So you need not to be told everything. Yes. That is that which you learn.
You learn something.
Yeah, you learn something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prof, what were you doing before the president picked you as his advisor on education?
Okay. I was a director of the University of Nairobi, Kisumu campus. And I have been director for 6 years. So my term of directorship was ending in September last year. I could not be director of a campus if I was not a member of the university's academic body.
Yeah.
So in the University of Nairobi, that's where I've grown, having been taken in as a tutorial fellow, grown through to be lecturer, senior lecturer, and a professor in a period of 11 years. Yes.
Good stuff. So the president picks you as his education advisor among the other advisors that he has on food security, on economy, on everything else.
Yes.
When the president was akiweka Biblia chini hivi, there was a whole conversation about our education sector. We are changing our curriculum. We have issues with universities that are completely insolvent. We have issues with tertiary education. We have issues with people's ability to actually take the children to school on school fees. And all those things, the first thing that we saw the president do is appoint this working party on education reforms. The report is out. It has very many recommendations, starting with how we take our children to school in the early education program, into the primary years, into the secondary years, which we are no longer going to be calling them secondary, and into tertiary and university education. These are far-reaching reforms.
Sure.
Ndu, just some highlights.
A few of those, which the Working Party told us about. Firstly, that the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development will reduce learning subjects. So we're seeing a reduction in those. That was one thing that came out because the load seems to be heavy, right? Sure. So we're looking at a reduction from 9 to 7 in lower primary, upper primary from 12 to 8, junior from 14 to 9, and pre-primary to have 5, and senior school to have 7. Big difference from what we see today. Yes. School capitation is to be increased, and then you will have double capitation to 2,000 for the primary level, 2,000 and some on top, 15,000 for junior school, 22,000 for senior school, right? 19,000 for special needs institutions, and 38,000 for boarding. Right? And they've said now that these will be renewed every 3 years. Another one that stands out is that primary school will be called comprehensive school, high school or secondary school will be called senior school. And so there's two demarcations, one to the other. It's going to be very clear. There will also be a one council that coordinates bursaries. So there will be no question about where are you getting assistance from. Is it your member of parliament? Is it the president's fund? Is it one council? And they will be responsible for all of that, which I think is fantastic, but okay. There will also be the decategorization of schools, and that's a big one because national schools, county schools, ex-county schools, sub-county schools, that will be a thing of the past. Everybody essentially on the same playing field. We've also seen that they've suggested or looking at making sure that teachers will go through retraining while on the job for the CBC curriculum. We've also seen that they've suggested that instead of that schools will now go towards STEM or other programs. So you go into programs as opposed to now having to fight for marks in an exam.
It's called career paths.
Career paths, yeah, exactly. Going now to higher education, that institutions will now leave the Public Service Commission in terms of recommendation for DVCs and VCs, and university councils now will make those decisions in terms of who those will be. We've also seen that there will be accelerated educational programs for marginalized groups and learners with special needs and adult and it's 14 of them. There's a raft of, but these are some of the ones that stand out today. Yeah. If we start with the decategorization of schools, I would like to hear what your thoughts are about this in terms of how it is going to be implemented, because it's great to say it, but what happens? Will we wake up one morning and we will be told all schools up for grabs, go?
Thank you very much. Some clarification, Latif. When the president appointed the Council of Economic Advisors, there was no designation that you will be advising on education, you will be doing this. As the Council of Economic Advisors, we advise the president across all sectors of the economy, and most importantly, the priority areas in his economic transformative agenda. But you realize that in the composition of this council, we have different specialities and the professions. So you'll find cutting across in education, you'll find there is investment climate, you go all through, and a number of things.
I see.
So it has to be very clear that we focus on the president's priorities and deliveries in his plan, transformative agenda. I happen to be from the academia. Dr. Ndi is academia. We have a professor there who is a professor of law and so forth and so on. So we cut across the various sectors of the economy. Back to the question. We are not going to wake up in the morning and find that the categorization has taken place. The wisdom of the Presidential Working Party was informed that a number of these reforms will have to take place, and what you have not accessed maybe is the proposal of the implementation framework and the implementation metrics. In this report, there is an implementation action plan, that there are those that will be implemented. You realize that even when this report has been released, there was an interim report, and the implementation has already taken place, right? And at the final presentation or submission of this report, the Presidential Working Party has provided a very clear time frame for the implementation of the different recommendations that have been put forth. And therefore, one of the considerations that are going to be critical in implementing these particular recommendations, there is a requirement of policy as well as legal and regulatory framework to inform the various recommendations in terms of implementation. So we are not going to wake up in the morning and then find a particular school that was a national school has been categorized along the various career paths. What is going to happen is that there will be, and they have proposed a very clear way, there is a ministerial implementation committee that will be established, and that ministerial implementation committee will interpret the implementation action plan that has been developed, and then do an assessment, look at the various schools, look at their areas of strength, their capacity, and then be able to actualize this within the particular timeframes that have been set. Some of the reforms, as I've said, have already been implemented. Others are going to be implemented along the different timeframes that have been provided in the implementation plan. And then we are going to see some others waiting for some of the reforms. There are some legal, regulatory, policy frameworks that have to be in place to allow for that particular implementation.
Okay.
And therefore, there is a specific timeline for every recommendation that is to be implemented.
I'm looking at the
that is in
report.
Yes.
The public schools categorization policies and implementation on access, transition, and costs. The recommendation is discontinue categorization of public secondary schools from the current nomenclature. The activities here would be undertaking an audit to establish the number and distribution of public secondary schools in Kenya.
Exactly.
Generate criteria for classifying schools in terms of career pathways while ensuring all regions have all the options.
Sure.
The responsibility here falls on the Ministry of Education. Timeline, 6 months.
Exactly.
6 months?
Yeah.
Prof? So what should we see after 6 months?
Within the State Department of Basic Education, there is a lot of capacity that is rolled out all the way. And already, these schools are known with regard to what particular areas that they will inform in terms of the career paths.
Okay.
And therefore, the view here is, in terms of assessment, there is the infrastructure already. And in the current system, where you have the National Education Management Information System, the different schools are already in their various current nomenclature.
Yes.
So it is a matter of having to develop that criteria. There has to be that capacity, and if you get to the most resourced state department is the State Department for Basic Education. And it is our belief, and from the Council of Economic Advisors, that the timelines that have been provided here were never brought or were never put on board having not considered the capacity and having not considered the urgency with which the recommendations have to be implemented.
I can see the possibility, of course, of within a week, the State Department for Basic Education knows the schools that it has across the country.
Exactly.
So the thing of just identifying the schools, does not even require a morning. It's just, how many do we have? We have the numbers. Okay. How many are national schools? How many are extra county, sub-county? We know.
Exactly.
Now, when we now go into career pathways, you could easily say Alliance would go into this career pathway, or any other national school could go into this career pathway. But a majority of our schools, Prof, are sub-county day schools. Now, if a sub-county day school in a certain village is then now given a certain career pathway, what does that mean about the children who would want to take another career pathway in that same village, they have to move to a different village to access a different school? It's a day school.
Okay. As you have read in the recommendations and what the specific activities to be undertaken, part and parcel of the activities to be undertaken is to consider a number of those aspects. And therefore, it will be very clear that within a particular locality, in a particular schools, the State Department will have to develop criteria that will enable the placement of the different students in their career paths. And therefore, just as we have seen in the past, the school where I went, for example, the time I went to that school, it was a mixed boarding and day school, mixed boys and girls. And there was another neighboring school that was the same formation. 1 or 2 years later, after I left the school, my school where I was converted into a girls' school, and the other one was converted into a boys' school.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And within that framework, therefore, and what you have asked, if students have to move, right? You discover then, where I was, the students who are boys moved out to the neighboring school, and the girls from the other school came to this school that is a girls' school, right? In terms of the career pathways, this is something that happens within the 4 years. The current high schools and second schools, you realize that there's Form 1, Form 2, and then 3, 4.
Yes.
You know, at Form 3 and 4, that's where students start making choices, right?
Yes.
And that is where now that criteria has to apply and place. But in the implementation of full implementation of the competence-based curriculum, you will find that there is the senior, the junior schools and the senior schools, and therefore it will be possible by way of applying that criteria to locate students in their career pathways, because they have already been asked to provide for that information, and it will be possible. However, in any policy, and this we see as I specialize in strategy, and one of the things is that you have a policy that can be very brilliantly developed, but implementation is where you have issues.
Yes.
And that is what His Excellency the President has been very emphatic, and all of us.
And he says we must.
That implementation has to be clear, and it has to be realized within the time frames. But there is no backtracking.
That is where my issues are.
Yes.
Looking at this entire implementation matrix,
Yes.
most of these changes are to be implemented within 6 months, 1 year, a majority of them. A few others within 2 years. Only one to be implemented within 5 years, and some few others to be implemented within 3 years. Let me tell you the one for 5 years, according to this. Supporting technical universities with appropriate infrastructure for SNE programs. That to take 5 years. State Department for TVET and industry, TVET institutions and development partners to be involved in it. The ones for 3 years are also in TVET, universities that were upgraded from TVET to progressively transfer services of academic staff who do not meet the requisite qualifications to each in a university to happen over 3 years. Something else to happen over 3 years, entrenching the Kenya School of TVET in the TVET Act and providing for its regional campuses, strengthening utilization of ODEL in TVET. Those are the things that will take 3 years. Everything else is like 1 year, 2 years, 6 months, 1 year, 2. That's where questions come in. Are we really going to see a transformation of our education sector by 2025, Prof?
Let me say this. When the participation, all the participants in the presidential working party on education reforms, the different PSs, that is the PS for basic education, the PS for TVET, and the PS for higher education, had representation, and sometimes they will even participate.
Yeah.
When these timelines have been were put forth, there was adequate consultation. And even when these timelines have been proposed, there are those activities that are already ongoing. One of the beautiful things is that some of these recommendations, there are activities that you will find that they will not start from zero. They are already in
advanced stages.
And therefore, when there was consultation that carrying out some of these recommendations will require this timeline and this timeline, the specific state departments had their input and therefore concurred with that. Now, when you talk about the ideal situation, you will really see that the recommendations put across and the timelines, if resources and the human capital required and the policy reforms and everything that is required is put in place sequentially, you will find this implementation, these timelines realistic. However, on the ground, there is what we called, what is deliberately planned, and that is exactly what we see in the plan. But there could be exigencies and emerging issues. And one of the things that happen is that we have to be flexible to look at the realities on the ground. And what the president has actually asked is that there has to be frequent